I think I've used that term, fine line, between a groove and a rut, and I really think that's true, because the teams are, man, competitive. So I think it's what we saw with Detroit a year ago when we watched them with their slow start, and so the focus has been on us.
Welcome in, everybody, to a special edition of the Not Another Bucking podcast. I'm Nick Kosmider, your host, Broncos beat reporter, joined in this post-game wrap-up edition with producer Kaz. And this is a special edition because it's the Broncos beating the Chiefs, something that had not happened since the second Obama administration in 2015. The Broncos had dropped 16 in a row to the Kansas City Chiefs. They end that streak today at Empower Field at Mile High, 24-9. Russell Wilson, even within a conservative game plan, throws 3 touchdown passes. The Broncos forced 5 takeaways, most turnovers the Chiefs have had since 2018. They harass Patrick Mahomes. They play great keep away in the second half, pounding the run, capitalizing on those turnovers, and the end result is a 24-9 win that moves the Broncos to 3-5 as they fall into their bye week. When they get back on November 13th, they'll go to Buffalo to face the Bills on a Monday night game. But Matt, this one is just all about the streak. And while players downplayed it after the game, right? They've said, listen, this is a new team. This team was 0-1 against the Chiefs, and that's the way that you have to have that mindset. But for players on this team that have been through so much of that, and even some of them who aren't, who have kind of felt from their teammates, what it's sort of been like, that's it's an anchor. And as much as, they try to pretend that it's just another game, getting something like that off your shoulders is a big deal. And I don't think that the Broncos can really start going forward until they have something like that. It's a win you can point to and say, this is kind of proof of concept, right? We ran the football. We played relatively clean football. We were really competitive in all 3 phases of the game, and we got the job done at home. And where it goes from here, we will find out. But I just think this is the kind of staple win that if the Broncos actually kind of get on a roll and they start to kind of turn the tide, whether it's, fully getting there this year or going into next season, this feels like a game that you're going to look back on and say, for a lot of reasons, this was pretty pivotal.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Sean Payton talked about kind of getting a little bit of momentum going as you're getting into the bye week. So, you're coming off of 2 wins. And even in the game before that against the Broncos, the defense played phenomenal. I mean, the defense in 2 games against the Chiefs gave up 28 points like that. And even Mahomes, right. And even after the game, Patrick Mahomes is talking about, he's like, they have to go watch film because other teams are going to be watching what the Broncos did over these last 2 games to look to replicate that. So I think that the secondary for the Broncos is probably the unit that has made the biggest strides in the last few weeks, and getting some of those guys back from injury, getting Justin Simmons back and getting PJ Locke are getting Locke back. Like, those were some players who were making really, really good plays today. Jaquan McMillan played a hell of a game today. Who's someone, he's the nickelback, but like when I see those guys, those nickelbacks, like the small little scat cornerbacks coming up and making big stops in the run game or in like the screen game, it's like, yes, this is like the defense finally starting to hit its stride. And that's what I love to, like, I want to see more of that from this team, more of that aggressive defensive thing. Cause the way that the Broncos can play when they have a lead and when they have momentum compared to when they're trailing and trying to come back, like that's just not what this team's designed to do. So like seeing the Broncos get a lead and being able to play with that like smash mouth football, like that was fun to watch today.
Yeah, and I kind of like hung on something you said about Mahomes saying that, hey, we're going to have to adjust because teams are going to find out what the Broncos did. The thought that teams would be modeling themselves after a Broncos defense, like if you had said that back at the end of September when they gave up 70 points in a loss to the Miami Dolphins, you'd be thinking like this defense is like the last thing you would look to. They were on a historically inept pace. But Matt, since week 4, this team and week 4 wasn't a banner week for the Broncos, but we're throwing that in there to kind of just sort of look at the results since that Miami debacle. Since week 4, this is the number 3 red zone efficiency defense in the NFL. They have the second most takeaways in the NFL with 11. And they're top 10 in third down defense. They're top 10 in sacks. This is a defense that has really turned the tide. I mean, when you're talking about where they were in that game, and then again, even in the game they won against the Bears, in which they gave up 4 touchdowns. This is a team that is really, really starting to right the ship. And there's a lot of things that you can point to, but man, like Justin Simmons being back, like it's starting to be now where you look at what they've done, really since week 5, and where they were in the Dolphins and Bears games that he did not play in. It's becoming more and more clear just how pivotal he is to like what they're doing, both in his individual just like awareness and his ability to make plays. He's had 2 picks since he came back. He recovered a fumble today as well, but also just in the way that he is able to get guys aligned, have them feel confident in the spaces that they're in. I thought one of the things that was really noticeable about the Broncos today is, the Chiefs have this just storm of pre-snap motions and misdirections, and the Broncos were just staying home by and large, all the time. Like, you're going to get beat by the Chiefs on something here and there. Like, you're going to get caught going one way and they throw it back. Those things are going to happen. But by and large, they were really disciplined, stayed home on all this kind of eye candy type stuff. And that has been a hallmark of this team since Justin Simmons came back. Of course, he's not one to take credit for any of it. He said, I thought the way that Vance Joseph mixed up his calls with the blitzes today against Patrick Mahomes was excellent. He gave the defensive front a lot of credit. They had 3 sacks today. 2 of those came in sort of that last gasp drive for the Chiefs. But even before they started kind of piling up sacks at the end, they were pressuring effectively. They were moving Patrick Mahomes off his spots. And on a day where he obviously physically wasn't feeling well, they just were able to take advantage of a lot of that. And so when you start to look forward and say, hey, you have a defense now that's going to give you a chance. This is what we thought this defense was going to be at the beginning of the season. I think that's what made those first couple weeks such a surprise. But the more you look at it, the more you say, hey, you got Justin Simmons back. Other guys are getting more and more comfortable with the scheme. You put all that together and say, hey, this defense is going to be good enough. We know this offense is improved. Russell Wilson already has 16 touchdown passes. That's how many he threw last year. So like this offense is better. They're running the football. Javonte Williams over the last 3 weeks has looked really, really good and able to carry load. He had 27 carries today, career high. So I just think they kind of have a proof of concept of like, this is the complementary component of a game plan that we can put together.
Yeah. And talk a little bit about Justin Simmons, like you're saying. I thought it was fitting that he was the one who kind of got that walk-off, essentially interception off of Mahomes, because he's kind of seems to have Mahomes' number now, 5 interceptions against him, by the most by any player in the NFL. But I also thought it was interesting earlier in the week, kind of reacting to last week's game. You talked to Josie Jewell and you asked about Baron Browning coming back in and how Jewell was talking up about how Browning was coming in with energy and playing fast off the edge, and that he really does a great job bringing it together. And he had another great game today, 2 sacks, the strip fumble. Like he was a guy who coming off the edge who also kind of gave that big lift to the Broncos defense today. And I thought that his performance, again, for the last 2 weeks has also been part of what's stepping that defense up to the next level.
Yeah, 100%. Baron Browning has been kind of a revelation in just these 2 weeks. I mean, he came in against the Packers, made his debut last week, was on a snap count, I think just 26 snaps, but had 4 pressures within those 26 snaps, including a quarterback hit like on his second or third pass rush snap of the game. And then you saw it from the very beginning today. He is a load. And they've gotten – they're setting the edge a lot better in the run game, and that's something he's only going to help more with, just because he's the most, kind of big and physical guy that they have playing on that edge. But, look, I think this is a team that they viewed sort of, getting rid of Randy Gregory and Frank Clark, given where those guys were at in their careers, what they might have wanted in their situation versus what the Broncos wanted to see from their young guys, sort of viewed, the trade of Gregory and the release of Clark as addition by subtraction. And given the way that they have performed since they made those changes, it's kind of hard to argue that. The Broncos are getting pressure. These young guys who just sort of had these kind of bit roles. Jonathan Cooper, Nick Benito, even Baron Browning to a degree are now just getting let loose, and they're playing with confidence. And I think you're starting to see that build. I also think Zach Allen has played a lot better the last few weeks. He was dynamite today. He was really a load for that Chiefs front.
Especially in the red zone.
Yeah, especially in the red zone. You're right. Where the Chiefs in 8 red zone trips in these 2 games against the Broncos scored 1 touchdown. That is tough to do against the Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid offense. So again, I just think that is just what gives you confidence. And I mean, you talk about the odds now. They're 3-5. It's still a massive hill to climb. And I just can't think today. I'm like, gosh, if you won one of those Raiders or Commanders games, week 1 or 2, you look back and you just say, man, 4-4. You're feeling like we can do this. Like this is pretty wide open. And it's, not to say that they're mathematically out now, and beating a Chiefs team, that's one where you look at the schedule, you didn't really have that checked off as one. It gives you a chance. Their hole is still probably too deep to overcome. But again, I think this team is a lot more now looking like a team that's like, hey, this is sort of the start of our build where we're really going to be able to play competitive football. We'll see what happens, but a lot closer to that than they are a team that's going to be fighting for, a top selection in the draft.
True. And I mean, so the team has some momentum going into the bye, coming off a couple wins, but then you're playing against Buffalo, who has been good, but not as good as previously have. They've kind of been playing at the level of their competition quite a bit this season. Then you get Minnesota, who likely are going to be starting a backup quarterback for that week, and then the Cleveland Browns, who have been good on the ground, and then you get Houston Texans, Los Angeles Chargers. There's some teams that a good football team can beat.
Vikings with no Kirk Cousins now,
right? So there's some teams that that a good team can beat. Does that mean that the Broncos continue that momentum and beat them? I don't know, but it was nice to see them kind of overcoming some adversity today. So, for example, come down near the end of the first half. So
my God.
Oh man, you get the turnover. You're thinking, oh, we're going to get some points. We're going to, back to get the 2-for-1 at the end of the half and then get the ball. You get the turnover and then you give it right back. And 9 seconds later, Patrick Mahomes has them in field goal range. And you get at least a 6-point swing there. And the Broncos do one of the things that over the last couple of years has been very dangerous. They brought a lead into halftime, which they don't usually win games where they're leading at halftime.
They've protected 2 halftime leads in a row now.
Oh yeah, sorry. So, so then you watch the start of the second half and it's like, what? The Broncos are moving the ball at the start of the second half. They drive down. They're going to get a field goal, and the field goal gets blocked, and you're just like, it's happening again. I've seen this script before. I've read this one. But, the team had that adversity. But even with that, they fought back. The defense played really well in the second half. But you're thinking at halftime with 3 turnovers and only a 5-point lead that you're not feeling super comfortable. But the turnovers continued. The defense continued to play really well. And that team overcame kind of that difficulty and still came out with the win today.
Yeah, I feel like I got to talk about that again for a second because I have never watching this team. I'm a writer. I'm there to report what happens, to give context, to write. I'm not emotionally invested into this thing, right? It's a matter of helping people understand what's going on with the team, giving your analysis, giving your insight. But I found myself angry by that sequence at the end of the first half. And just to kind of more clearly set that up, the Broncos are leading 14-6. The Chiefs had been driving. They got inside the red zone with less than a minute to go. And so they're looking to set up at least a field goal, if not scoring a touchdown that could, either pull them to within one or tie the game. And then Baron Browning strips Patrick Mahomes. It gets recovered by Jonathan Cooper at Denver's 30-yard line with 48 seconds to go. So again, Broncos have an 8-point lead. They got the ball in their own 30. There's a little less than a minute to go. You say, hey, we can drive and maybe get a field goal here. And then the Broncos get a 3-yard gain, and Kansas City calls a timeout with 38 seconds to go. And you're like, oh, why are they giving Denver more opportunity to go down the field? Then Russell Wilson passes to Mims. They get 0 yards. It's now 3rd and 7. Kansas City has taken a timeout with 33 seconds to go. And you're like, oh, that's why they took timeouts. Well, on 3rd and 7, Russell Wilson hits Samaje Perine, gets out of bounds after a 10-yard gain. to give them a first down at their own 43. And so there's 26 seconds to go. They're nearing midfield. The Broncos still have 2 timeouts, and you're thinking, okay, they're gonna have a chance to kick a long field goal. But what happens on 3rd and 4 at about midfield with only 16 seconds to go? The Broncos drop back, and Russell Wilson gets sacked and fumbles the football. With 9 seconds to go, the Chiefs recover it again near midfield, and you just know at that point they're gonna get a big gain, 11 yards at Patrick Mahomes and Jerick McKinnon, and then Harrison Butker kicks a 56-yard field goal to cut it to 14-9. I am telling you, Matt, I said it was what happened essentially in Kansas City in the game on the Thursday night game. The Broncos were going for a potential field goal. They get sacked. In that instance, they then punted, but the punt was awful, and they got a penalty on it. And the Chiefs hit 2 big plays to get to within range for a 60-yard field goal plus that gets made. And you're just thinking, like, how do you let this happen again? How does Russell Wilson, a guy with 12 years in the league, not understand that situation better, allow himself to be vulnerable enough to fumble the football in that situation? I swear to you, I thought that was going to be the deciding part of the game. And so again, it's credit to the Broncos that they had a better stomach for it than I did, because you felt that, because you're like, okay, they get the ball to start the third quarter, the Broncos do, but how many times in this situation have they gone 3 and out? And to your point, they didn't. Even though they got that field goal blocked, which they were irate still after the game, saying that was an offside penalty on Jason Reed, who jumped the snap to get that block. But either way, they took more than 7 minutes off the clock in driving down there, and that was the start of what became just a ball dominant second half by the Broncos. Of the first 20 minutes or so of the second half, the Chiefs possessed the ball for only 3.5 minutes. Like they had a relatively short drive that ended in a punt after the blocked field goal, and then McCole Hardman, as we mentioned earlier, muffed the punt in the fourth quarter. The Chiefs were about to get the ball back down 14-9 with a chance to go down and potentially take the lead. Instead, Hardman fumbles. Drew Sanders, the rookie linebacker, recovers, and then Russell Wilson hits Cortland Sutton for the touchdown. Sutton's 6th of the year, tying his career high already, to put Broncos up 21-9. They later added a field goal to give you the final score. But yeah, Matt, I just thought that the way that they played ball dominant football in the second half was really impressive, because it wasn't as if they were like just getting huge chunks in the run game, but they stayed to it. 40 carries today against only 19 passes for Russell Wilson. Of course, they dropped back a lot more. He was sacked 6 times, but 19 pass attempts to 40 rushes for the Broncos, season high 153 yards. The 19 pass attempts by Russell Wilson, his fewest since 2013, his second year in the NFL. We knew that was the kind of game plan that they were gonna have. But Matt, I got to toot my own horn a little bit, because earlier this week I wrote a piece about hey, this is the game plan you have to play against the Chiefs. You have to try to keep Mahomes off the field, run the football, get manageable third down situations, try to convert them. Broncos were a decent 6 of 14 today on third down, but I said you have to incorporate some deep shots into the game, because the Broncos played this ultra conservative game plan, still turned the ball over 3 times, still took 4 sacks, still had 4 passes batted down at the line of scrimmage. So so you didn't even get the fruits of all these mistakes that had happened. You didn't have even the risk of having something good happen out of it. Today, I thought they had some really well-timed deep shots. Jerry Jeudy, 39 yards in the second quarter. Cortland Sutton helped jumpstart that third quarter drive that ultimately ended in a blocked field goal with a 23-yard, just amazing contested catch. He also drew a penalty on that play, but also drew a DPI on a play later in the second half. So I just thought mixing that in, getting a few chunks really helped them get in a position where they could actually cross the goal line.
Yeah, I want to go back to that Jerry Jeudy catch, the 39-yarder, because those kinds of plays, those are the kinds of plays that you want from a first-round pick of your wide receiver. Like the dude, I don't know how high that dude jumped. They have to have the analytics somewhere. Like that dude went up and got that ball. Like that, he looked like he cleared 5 feet up in the air.
Yeah, so that might be for a moment, but that was maybe one of the best catches of his career for sure.
Right, and then so talking about things that you and I can't do, he goes up 5 feet in the air to catch that ball. then he comes a few plays later, catches the touchdown, and starts dancing. Another thing that you and I can't do. But but I also I don't know exactly what that dance was. He said something about a shark. It looked a little odd to me, but it's just good to see Jerry Jeudy find the end zone and have some energy and having some fun in that first half. That was good to see, and that drive was big because it up 14-3 at that point.
Yeah.
That gave that team a lot more faith, a little bit of cushion going into the second half that they ended up being able to use and take advantage of.
Yeah. So I thought they just complement. It was the most complete complementary game that they've played. The huge special teams play was right out of the gate. The Broncos win the toss, they defer, so Chiefs get it first. They force a 3-and-out in which they're just flying around the football. Nick Bonito, after kind of pressuring Patrick Mahomes on the third down play, it's kind of all up in his face. They're drawing at him saying, "Hey, I'm going to be here all day," kind of thing. And then the punt that Marvin Mims gets a chance to return, takes it back 31 yards. I mean, this guy is already one of the most dynamic returners in the NFL. There's not a punt that he has returned this year that has gone for less than 11 yards. And you take away his one muff punt against the Jets, which was a killer. But this guy, by and large, has just been excellent in the return game. And obviously also has a kickoff return for a touchdown in week 3 against the Dolphins. Just has been everything you could everything you could want in that role. And that helped set them up for a short field, because their first drive, they had no play longer than 9 yards, but they just sort of kind of just kept chipping away. And I thought that was pretty indicative of what the day ended up becoming for Denver, was just like, hey, we're just going to grind this out. And the offensive line they were loving it. Like Quinn Miners had these plays where he's getting up, he's signaling first down. And then later in the game, Mike McGlinchey and Garrett Bowles were doing the same thing. It was just
play there.
Yeah. So, I mean, they were talking about it afterward, like, this is the kind of game that you love to play as an offensive lineman. And yeah, there were some sacks, there were some breakdowns in protection. Again, I just think some of that is on Russell Wilson, and some of it you're just going to have to live with.
There was one play, like in the first drive of the third quarter, Bowles, he's blocking on Karlaftis, and he blocked, it drops back, blocks him 5 seconds, he releases, and then he turns around and he sees Russell still has the ball, and he's just like, oh, and you're like, that's just Russell Wilson. Sometimes those off schedule plays, require him to hold the ball, but sometimes that means that he's going to get sacked 7 seconds after the snap, and you're just going to kind of have to take those. This offense, you need to have as few as possible. But that I saw that Bulls just like, oh god.
I know. And I was kind of surprised by the number. Like when I went back and looked at it, maybe it's because, there was a couple, once they got that lead, that they were just a little bit more comfortable taking, I guess. And it was 6 sacks, but for 27 yards. So you're looking at that, and that's just a little bit over 4 yards per sack. So it wasn't as if, outside the one that he fumbled at the very end of the second quarter, that was the one devastating play of the game. But the rest of them, they just weren't, they weren't very super loud.
Right. You had the one where he slid as he was running, he slid to stay in bounds, and Karlaftis gets an extra sack for that. So the numbers look a little worse than they otherwise would. But one other thing I wanted to touch on, we talked you and I were talking earlier in the week as we're getting into this about the potential for 6 to 14 inches of snow, and how when you have a game like or a streak like this where you've lost so many in a row, you welcome any variable you can get. And today that it ended up being relatively good weather, and kind of the one time that kind of played into the game, it seemed like, was when the Broncos decided to punt the ball from the 36-yard line instead of kick a 54-yard field goal. Something that they would, Will Lutz has the leg to kick a 54-yard field goal, but with gusty winds and a cold ball, we're just going to go ahead and punt it. And, McCole Hardman a few minutes, or, muffs that, and that turns into a really big thing. So one of those little small variables of the weather that, the ball sometimes the ball bounces your way, sometimes the ball bounces into a receiver's hands behind you, with the, like it did in the Packers game. But, that was one of those situations where you take that variable, you take that win any way you can get in the NFL.
Yeah, no, it was a really good point. Because it was 4th and 17 from the 36. So obviously if you're in that part of the field and it's a manageable fourth down, you probably say this, in this weather, maybe we go for it. But I thought without being able to reach it, on a play, right, you're not picking up a 4th and 17. I thought they'd kick the field goal. Obviously, Will Lutz has shown that he has that kind of leg. He's been in a pretty good rut. And if you make that, you make it an 8-point lead. But I think some of the calculus there was like, hey, we like the way that our defense is playing. The last thing we want to maybe do is give the Chiefs some of this, like, just, short field, easy momentum, go down, and you miss that. They go down and score on a really short field, and all of a sudden you're losing the game. It's part of the calculus was like, hey, if they're going to go down and take it and score a touchdown to take the lead on us, let's make them go all the way down the field, especially the way you've been taking the ball away. I think they just felt pretty good about the way that they were playing defensively, which again is like, you go back and look at this, you didn't really see that materializing for this team this quickly in terms of how fast they've turned it around. But yeah, obviously the decision to kick it worked out really well for the Broncos after Drew Sanders recovered at the 10-yard line. 2 plays later, Russell Wilson to Cortland Sutton. So yeah, it just kind of goes back to that, to that complimentary football. And sometimes you make your own luck. And I thought the Broncos did that today. Yeah, the weather did not ultimately end up being a factor outside of the fact that it was really cold. I had a couple of friends that were at the game talking about how it was really actually a pretty awesome atmosphere, in the stands. And even though there was about 12,000 no-shows today, that it felt full. It was the most kind of electric environment that they've had there in quite a while. And so we'll see, Matt. We'll see where this goes. The last thing to touch on, I think, is that we now have the trade deadline that's coming up on Tuesday, and Sean Payton was asked probably for the last time about what that will, what that looks like for the Broncos. And he kind of continued to say, listen, when you're in a position like we are, you have people calling and picking up the phone is the professional thing to do. But we are, we are not, we don't feel like we're sellers. We're feeling good about who we have and what we're trying to do. And so I think it's a lot easier to take that stance after a win like this, in which some of the guys that have been talked about trade wise, you lose any of them, and then all this momentum and any kind of hope you have of like going out there and playing well probably goes out the window. Like, you need Jerry Jeudy on this team if you're going to do anything. You need Josie Jewell, you need Justin Simmons. So it's just like, where they're at now, actually trying to turn this thing around. You can't really say you're doing that with a straight face if you end up trading one of those guys. So
no, I agree. Sean Payton made it clear that he doesn't think the team's going to be buying either, and I think that's probably the right bet given the lack of draft capital this team has.
Yeah.
But they aren't going to be giving guys away just for any kind of, or for minimum compensation. So I think
you'll have to be blown away, and we just haven't seen that around the league of teams that are like, taking those kind of huge swings. Kevin Byard went for a 5th and a 6th round pick from the Titans to the Eagles. But the Eagles obviously gave back a safety in that deal, Terrell Edmonds, who was a former 1st round pick himself. So, I think Justin Simmons would fetch a little bit higher than that, but you're just not seeing the deals out there that are like blowing teams away who are actually like in the seller's market. And so unless that changes, unless somebody's coming after you, coming to say, hey, I'll give you a 1st round pick for Jerry Jeudy because we're near the top and we think this guy can put us over the top. Then maybe that's a decision. But the way that it's gone now, the way that they've closed in front of this trade deadline going into their bye, it looks like it's shaping up to be a much quieter Tuesday, which, hey, bye week, that's cool with me, man. I'm ready to take a little bit of time off, but we'll be back next week. We'll have a midweek episode. We will not have obviously our post game episode next week, but then we will additionally be back for a midweek episode going into the Bills game, and then post game reaction from there on the scene in Buffalo as well. So thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed our breakdown of the Broncos' streak busting win against the Chiefs. Please remember to subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review, let us know what you think. Until then, see you next time. Thanks for listening.